right, so today we're going to do a deep dive into something I think a lot of you have been asking about. Apple getting into the satellite internet game and how they might end up stacking up against, the big player right now, Starlink. We've got a whole bunch of recent news articles and some market analysis reports to break down for you. So you guys already know Starlink's kind of the big name right now in the satellite internet. But Apple's been making some pretty interesting moves. We're going to kind of figure out if they could be a real contender.
Yeah, and what's really captured everyone's attention, I think, is this $1.5 billion investment that Apple made in Global Star, which is a company that specializes in satellite connectivity.
Yeah.
And it's not just about, throwing money around. This is a calculated move that tells us that Apple is serious about, expanding its reach beyond just, smartphones.
Yeah. Reaching for the stars, literally. But why Global Star specifically? There are other players out there. What makes this partnership so strategic for Apple?
Well, Global Star has a pretty robust infrastructure already in place, including a constellation of satellites that are already orbiting Earth. This gives Apple a head start in terms of, actually being able to deliver satellite-based services. Instead of starting from scratch, they're tapping into a network that's, ready to go.
So it's like a shortcut. But a very expensive shortcut. And speaking of strategic moves, Apple's been busy on the hiring front, too. They've posted a bunch of jobs that really hint at them, kind of, building out their own mobile satellite service. So what kind of positions are they filling? And what does that tell us about, their ambitions?
Yeah, well, they're looking for specialists in satellite communications, obviously, but also folks with expertise in signal processing, network architecture.
Yeah.
It really points toward a desire to not just offer, basic connectivity, but to actually create a high-quality, reliable service, crystal clear calls even when you're in the middle of nowhere, that kind of thing.
Makes sense. After all, Apple is all about that smooth user experience, so they wouldn't want to launch some clunky satellite service that frustrates people. But there's another development that's really gotten people talking, Apple's iOS 18.3 update, which includes support for Starlink's direct-to-cell coverage, iPhones sending text messages via satellite. Is this as big a deal as everyone is making it out to be?
It's definitely significant. It opens up the possibility of, staying connected, even in areas where you don't have cell service, which could be life-saving, in emergencies, or just incredibly convenient if you're traveling or you're an adventurer. Technically, it's also quite impressive. SpaceX and T-Mobile partnered to create this network of low Earth orbit satellites that can actually connect directly to cell phones. So this kind of bypasses the need for those traditional cell towers, which is a big deal when we're talking about, extending coverage.
Yeah. Right now, it's in beta testing, with some iPhone users already sending those satellite texts. But voice calls and data are on the roadmap too, right? Imagine streaming a movie from the top of Mount Everest.
That is the vision. And it definitely has the potential to be a game changer. But it's worth, considering. How many people really need that level of connectivity in those kinds of extreme situations? Is this a niche feature for a select few, or is this something that could really appeal to a wider audience?
That's a great point. It's easy to get caught up in the wow factor, but the practical implications are what really matter. So we've got Apple investing in Global Star. They're building out their own team. Now they're integrating with Starlink. It's like they're playing both sides of the field. They're competing and collaborating at the same time. Does this even make sense strategically?
It's definitely a complex landscape they're navigating. On the one hand, they're clearly signaling their intention to, to be a force in the satellite internet market. But on the other hand, they're also acknowledging the strength of Starlink's existing network by incorporating it into devices.
So it's not just a simple Apple versus Starlink story, right? Yeah. There's more nuance to it.
Exactly. And that's where things get really interesting. We're seeing the early stages of a potential rivalry, but also a recognition of the potential benefits of working together.
Okay. So we've covered Apple's major moves, but what does all of this actually mean for the future of the satellite internet market as a whole? Is this just like a tech world power play? Or is there something bigger happening here?
That's a question we need to explore. Because Apple entering the scene could have ripple effects far beyond just these two companies.
All right, buckle up, listeners, because we're about to go even deeper into the implications of all of this. What could this mean for consumers, for traditional telecommunication companies, for the way we access information and connect with each other? We'll tackle all of that and more, so stay with us. Okay, so we've been laying out how Apple's been making some pretty bold moves in the satellite internet game. But it feels like this is about more than Just which tech giant ends up coming out on top. This feels like we're on the verge of like a connectivity revolution. And that's something that's definitely worth exploring a little bit further.
Yeah, precisely. I think, Apple and Starlink's actions, they're really only one part of a much bigger story. We're talking about a future where internet access could become as ubiquitous as air, no matter where you are on the planet.
Okay, so paint that picture for us. What could this future actually look like in practical terms?
Well, imagine, remote villages in developing countries, places that have always struggled with limited internet access, suddenly being able to connect to the world, schools, businesses, healthcare providers, all empowered by, reliable high-speed internet. Or I think about disaster relief efforts. Imagine being able to coordinate aid and communicate effectively, even when traditional infrastructure is down.
It's a powerful vision, no doubt. But as with any technological leap, there are bound to be some hurdles along the way, right? What are some of the potential downsides or challenges that we need to be thinking about?
Well, that's a crucial question. One concern that often comes up is the potential for increased space debris. As more and more satellites are launched into orbit, it's a finite resource, and we need to be mindful of the environmental impact.
So it's not just about beaming down internet, it's about responsible stewardship of space as well. What are the experts saying about how we can mitigate this risk?
Well, there are a lot of ongoing discussions about international regulations for satellite deployment. With a focus on, sustainability and responsible disposal, companies are also exploring innovative designs and technologies to minimize the footprint of their satellite constellations.
That's encouraging to hear. But beyond just the environmental aspect, what about data security? As we start to rely more and more on these satellite networks, the potential for hacking and data breaches becomes a real concern.
Absolutely. Cybersecurity is absolute paramount. These companies need to be investing heavily in robust encryption and security protocols to protect user data. And this also raises the question of privacy. Who has access to this data and how is it being used?
It seems like a complex issue with a lot of moving parts. Are there any kind of guidelines or regulations in place right now to address these privacy concerns?
Well, regulatory bodies are working to catch up with this. Rapid pace of technological development. There's a growing awareness of the need for clear guidelines and regulations to ensure that satellite internet services are both secure and respect user privacy.
So it's an evolving landscape, but it's good to know that, these issues are at least being talked about. But let's kind of shift gears for a second. We've been focusing a lot on the societal implications, but what about the economic ones? How could this satellite internet boom actually affect existing telecommunication companies and cellular networks as we know them?
Yeah, that's where things could get really disruptive. Imagine a world where, traditional cell phone plans become obsolete because you can access the internet directly via satellite anywhere in the world.
So are we talking about the potential death of the telecom industry as we know it?
Well, I don't think it's about immediate extinction, but it is about a fundamental shift in the way we think about connectivity. Traditional telecom companies are going to have to adapt and innovate to stay relevant in this new landscape. They might shift their focus to providing, value-added services, partnering with satellite providers, or exploring new technologies that can complement these satellite internet offerings.
Yeah, it's almost like the early days of the internet, where everything was new and uncertain. Businesses had to scramble to figure out their place in this rapidly evolving world, except this time it's happening on a global scale, and the stakes are even higher.
Exactly. And it's not just about businesses either. Consumers are also going to have more choices and potentially lower costs as competition in the satellite internet market heats up.
So for the listener out there who's been following along, what's the key takeaway? What should they be paying attention to as this story unfolds?
I'd say watch for how the industry addresses those critical challenges we discussed. Space debris, data security, and privacy. Also keep an eye on, the prices and the types of services that are being offered as competition intensifies.
Great advice. So we've got Apple and Starlink shaking things up, potential disruptions to the telecom industry, a whole lot of questions about how this is all going to play out. But there's one piece of the puzzle that we haven't really touched on yet. What about other companies that are vying for a spot in this satellite internet race? You're right. It's not just a two-horse race. There are other companies out there aiming for a slice of that satellite internet pie. So where do we even start with this lineup?
Well, we can't ignore the 800-pound gorilla in the room, Amazon. Their Project Kuiper is aiming to launch a massive constellation of over 3,000 satellites to provide global internet coverage. They are not messing around.
Over 3,000, that's a serious commitment. So what's their strategy? Beyond just sheer satellite quantity, are they doing anything differently?
Yeah, one key difference is their focus on resilience. and adaptability. They're distributing their satellites across multiple orbital planes, which minimizes the risk of outages. It's like having a backup generator for your internet. Even if some satellites have issues, the network should stay up and running.
So they're betting on reliability. But how does this translate to the actual user experience? I mean, will Amazon satellite internet be noticeably different from, say, Starlink's?
Well, that's the million-dollar question. Right now, it's all speculation. But Amazon is known for its customer-centric approach, so they could leverage their expertise in logistics and data management to offer a really seamless, user-friendly experience.
It's almost like they're taking their Prime delivery model and applying it to internet service, just delivering those data packets right to your doorstep, anywhere on Earth. But what about some of the smaller players? Are there any startups that are kind of catching your eye in this space?
Yeah, there's one that's particularly intriguing, AST Space Mobile. They're developing a system that uses giant satellites with these massive antennas to connect directly to regular smartphones. No special equipment needed.
So you're telling me I could potentially get satellite internet on my, you know, trusty old phone without having to buy some fancy new device?
That's the idea. They're aiming to make satellite connectivity as accessible as possible, even for people using older devices. It's a bold concept, and it remains to be seen if they can pull it off. But the potential impact is huge.
Yeah, it's like they're democratizing access to the internet, breaking down those barriers of expensive equipment and specialized technology. Okay, so we've got these established giants like Amazon, innovative startups like AST Space Mobile, and of course, Apple jumping into the fray. This is getting to be a pretty crowded playing field, and it's getting more exciting by the day, it seems. So what does all of this ultimately mean for the future of connectivity?
Well, I think we're at a really pivotal moment. For years, we've talked about the digital divide and how lack of internet access holds back, communities and individuals. Satellite internet really has the potential to bridge that divide like never before.
Yeah, it's not just about catching up on your favorite show while you're camping in the wilderness. It's about empowering people, fostering education, driving economic growth in places that have really been left behind.
Exactly. But at the same time, we can't just ignore those potential pitfalls. The issues of space debris, data security, and privacy. The technology is evolving rapidly, and it's crucial that we address these challenges responsibly.
So for our listener out there who's been with us this whole time for this deep dive, what's the main takeaway here? What should they be thinking about as they watch this story unfold?
I'd say stay curious, stay informed, and don't be afraid to ask the tough questions. Who benefits from this technology? Who might be left behind? What are the long-term implications for our society and for our planet? These are complex issues, but they're definitely worth grappling with.
Well said. This has been a really fascinating look at the satellite internet landscape, the players, the innovations, and the potential impact on our world. And it's clear that this story is far from over. Who knows what exciting developments are right around the corner?
Yeah, the future of connectivity is being written right now. And it's up to all of us to engage with it thoughtfully and critically.
So keep your eyes on the skies and your minds open to the possibilities. Until our next deep dive, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep those questions coming.